I just have to say that the fact that this is being called a victory by some people on our side of the aisle is absolutely inaccurate.
Welcome back to America Decides. That was Republican Mississippi Senator Roger Wicker on the debt ceiling agreement. Several senators on both sides of the aisle are now vowing to vote against it. Joel Payne and Michael Ricci joined us now. Joel is a CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist. Michael serves as communications director for the Committed to America Super PAC, which supports a Mike Pence 2024 presidential bid. He previously served as director of communications for then Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, and he also served former House Speaker Paul Ryan. Good to have both of you gentlemen here in our studio for America Decides. Michael, let's begin with you. We just heard from Republican Senator Roger Wicker. What's the fallout inside the Republican Party long-term, both politically and on policy?
Well, this is really when the fun starts, after the votes happen. I mean, you walked those halls as long as anybody.
I bothered you too many times.
Too many times. But House Republicans, in Ted Lasso, they say be a goldfish, have a short memory. House Republicans are not goldfish. They will remember what happened here, every slight, who voted yes, who voted no. And as the deal begins to unfold and senators try to find ways around it, and the administration tries to find little ways around it, the capital the speaker had to use to get this incredible achievement, it doesn't just replenish itself. He will have to go about doing that bit by bit in the months to come. It's the battle that Speaker Boehner and Speaker Ryan constantly fought. So in a sense, the battle is just beginning.
So the memory will linger inside the GOP. What about inside the Democratic Party, Joel? Senator Bernie Sanders and other progressives are saying no thanks to the deal. Will that alienate them with the White House in any way?
No, and you know this. There's free passes that are being given out this week, last week, and going forward. Free passes being votes that members like a Bernie Sanders or like on the House side of Pramila Jayapal have been given out to vote no against this because they understand that their constituency expects them to stand out against this. I think that's smart management by President Biden, by House Speaker McCarthy, by Senate leadership to allow their members to vote their conscience here because they know they have enough votes. They know they have enough to get to 218 in the House, which they did, and they know they're going to have enough to get this over the hump in the Senate. I think it's just a matter of getting through the amendment process, figuring out an agreement on timing. And I think the people who I talked to, I was just speaking to a Senate Democratic chief of staff today. They said they don't see any red flags about getting this passed today.
Let's turn to 2024. Michael, you are working to encourage former Vice President Mike Pence to jump in the race. We do expect him to join the field formally next Wednesday in Iowa. He has been making the argument for months that there is a path toward the nomination should he run for a traditional conservative. Where's the argument? How do you convince voters that Pence is the answer in 2024?
I think you'll see Vice President Pence run, especially in Iowa, as sort of that Reagan classical conservative, and no one has the experience, the conservative credentials that he does to make that argument. And with Iowa, you've got to reach these people 4, 5, 6, 7 times, go to their doors to really find out and discern what their vote's going to be. And Mike Pence has the kind of experience as a Midwest governor, experience in Congress to really make that case. And so I think he doesn't have to recalibrate his positions. He doesn't have to kind of go with the wind. And I think that voters in Iowa especially are looking for an authentic conservative candidate. Nobody can make that case better than Mike Pence.
He's not the only one who's expected to jump in next week. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who first ran back in 2016, he's likely to get in Tuesday in New Hampshire. As a Democrat assessing the GOP race, what do you make of both Pence and Christie moving toward a run?
Bigger field, bigger advantage for President Trump. I think because President Trump has such a strong grip on about, a third of that Republican electorate, I think it makes it easier for him to continue to dominate the field and to lord over the field. I do think that Governor DeSantis has hit the trail a lot more aggressive than most folks might have assumed he has. He's been kind of going directly at Trump, particularly on this back and forth about what's woke and what's not woke and whether or not that should be at issue in the Republican primary. Also, management of COVID, whether or not Governor DeSantis did that to a plumb, to the same level of Governor Cuomo in New York. I think that it's some interesting battle lines that are being drawn. I, for one, as a Democrat, I have my popcorn ready to see a really interesting back and forth. But I do think that this is the part of the primary where you have to ask yourself, what's your constituency? And I think for these new candidates that are coming to the field, what's their constituency? Chris Christie has an interesting opportunity here, but what's his constituency? That's the question.
And what's his target? Speaking of popcorn, let's take a listen to a moment from a prior debate years ago.
Marco, the thing is this. When you're president of the United States, when you're a governor of a state, the memorized 30-second speech where you talk about how great America is at the end of it doesn't solve one problem for one person.
This notion that Barack Obama doesn't know what he's doing is just not true.
There it is.
He knows exactly
there it is,
what he's
the memorized 25-second speech.
Well, that's
there
the
it is,
reason why
everybody.
this
Oh, that is an infamous moment in the Rubio world, perhaps a famous moment in the Christie world. Governor Christie, if he's on that debate stage later this summer in Milwaukee, late August, he is maybe going to take on former President Trump, but Trump might not even show up, Michael. He could decide to take on Governor DeSantis or former Vice President Pence. How do you deal with the Christie factor?
Well, you just said half the battle here, which is who actually gets up on that stage that night. And then, yeah, he's a heat-seeking missile, and I think he will make it pretty plain who his targets are. Yeah, you hope not to be one of them, but I don't think it'll be indiscriminate. I think he will have a plan. Chris Christie always has a plan, always has someone he wants to go after. But at the same time, he'll have to answer questions too about how he handled 2016, how he handled sort of being an ally of President Trump over the years. So it's not like he won't face some incoming on the back end. It's just who will on the back end try to give it to him, and then are they taking the risk that they're poking the bear? And so that'll be, to Joel's point, that'll be the time to get the popcorn and see what happens.
If it ends up being Trump, we're pretty clear about how the Democrats would run against the former president in a general election. But suppose it's one of the other contenders. How are Democrats preparing for a non-Trump world?
I think there was a time maybe a year ago where the Biden world, the apparatus around President Biden, would have been concerned or a little bit more concerned about a Ron DeSantis or even like a Nikki Haley. But because of how the issues are setting up on the Republican side, how Republicans are being forced to run to the right of MAGA on abortion, on some of these cultural issues like transgender issues, I think that sets up President Biden to run a pretty effective general election campaign against any of these Republicans. I've been teasing out a theory to a couple of my friends in Democratic politics. President Biden has shown himself to be kind of the best difficult circumstance president that we've seen in a while. He's governed in some really tough circumstances, and he can campaign, I think, in some tough circumstances because I think he's welcome at any dinner table in America. Can every Republican say that? That's the question they have to ask themselves when they're trying to figure out who their general election candidate is.
We'll have to leave it there. Joel Payne, Michael Ricci, thanks so much for swinging by. America Decides.